everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. So my name is Hyun, and I also go by Edward. I'm a doctoral student studying education psychology at Auburn University. And today we have a special guest, Dr. Taub. Dr. Taub is an assistant professor at the University of Central Florida. And today she's here to discuss her research, teaching, and past experience with us. And I believe that every audience will find this interview very insightful and helpful. So please watch this interview, and we're going to start our interview now. So my first question for you is, could you tell us about yourself?
Well, thank you for having me for this interview. So a little bit about myself. Originally, I am from Montreal, Canada, so way up north. I was born and raised there. I went to school there. I did my undergrad in psychology at McGill. Then I did my master's in educational psychology, also at McGill. I was working with Dr. Roger Azevedo, and he was wonderful, and I was going to continue my PhD with him also at McGill, but he moved to North Carolina State University. So he gave us the opportunity to go with him, and I took that opportunity. So I did my PhD at North Carolina State University in psychology, and that was, I say, one of the best decisions I've ever made. So then I got my PhD. I did a postdoc with Roger, and then we actually were both hired at the University of Central Florida. So we're both part of the Learning Sciences cluster. So we're, working together, continuing our relationship, which is exciting. I went from way up in Montreal, and now I live in sunny Florida.
Okay, Dr. Taub, thank you for sharing your response with us. And that's really interesting that you work with your former advisor now at the same institution. So that's wonderful. And our second question for you is, how has your past student experience shaped you as a researcher?
Well, so I already spoke about Roger a little bit. So that has definitely shaped my experience starting in grad school. Roger has taught me so much about self-regulated learning and advanced learning technologies, and learning from him has definitely helped me as a researcher become as driven and determined as he is. I think everyone knows Roger and knows that he's really wonderful. So he has definitely helped me as a researcher. But before I met him, I definitely had a lot of other experiences that have helped guide my research a little bit. So as an undergrad, and even before undergrad, I volunteered at a school in Montreal for students with special needs. And that experience has really helped me just want to be able to research students with exceptionalities. Working with them was so wonderful, and I want to continue working with them. So that's an area I always wanted to focus on, and now at UCF, I'm able to do that. So that experience and those experiences have really, helped me become a researcher. So I've also had experience just with, with kids as young as, really small daycare, which I've never actually done research with, but as young as that to, to high school and college. So it's just helped me as a researcher just want to be able to help such a large range or variety of students, help them become better self-regulators. And then Roger has really helped me, take that to the next level.
Okay, thank you for sharing your experience with us. And our third question is, could you tell us how your research is related to self-regulation or self-regulation learning?
So all of my research is really foundational in self-regulation, self-regulated learning. Especially as I started at UCF, I'm trying to investigate or study self-regulation, foster self-regulated learning across all students and all types of contexts. So again, I mentioned students with exceptionalities. How can we help them self-regulate? But also some other research projects, I've really been focusing on self-regulation and not necessarily only self-regulated learning, but also, self-regulation in other contexts. So I have one current research project where we're looking at, they're called the Lavender Council at University of Central Florida, and they focus on helping students, but also providing training for other faculty on the history of LGBTQ plus services. I took the training a little while back, and I was so fascinated with it. I was so fascinated with the facilitators that I also imagined people who were attending that training. They could voluntarily participate like I did, but there's also other groups who are, they basically have to participate. So it's providing them education about this group of people. And the facilitators were so wonderful at providing just the history and learning about pronouns and learning everything that I just wasn't exposed to before. And to me, I figured, depending on the audience, these facilitators have great emotion regulation skills. So I wanted to study them. I wanted to study, why are they so wonderful? So they are definitely regulating because they could be asked questions that might be a little uncomfortable, and they really just did such a great job at regulating their emotions. I have other studies looking at game-based learning and how do students self-regulate their learning. Also, just how do students self-regulate in an online physics course. So there's all components of self-regulation, but it's across all these different contexts. One more that I didn't mention was I also am looking at self-regulation during writing. So how are students self-regulating their writing? Are they engaging in planning, monitoring performance, and self-reflection as they write, and asking students to reflect on how they are as writers? So it's so interesting to be able to investigate self-regulation, self-regulated learning across all these different contexts.
Okay, Dr. Taub, that was a really great response. And actually, I have two follow-up questions. And if you don't mind, I'd like to address these questions in our interview, because I believe that the audience will definitely find it very interesting to hear about your thoughts. So my first follow-up question is, so in your previous response and this response, you talk about your experience working with students with exceptionality and special education needs. Now, I currently teach adolescent development motivation class, and then when I talk to my students, and these students are pre-service teachers who are gonna be teachers at middle and high school setting, and when I talk to them, they want to help their students, especially students with special needs, develop self-regulation skills, but they're not sure about how to properly help those students. So I'm just curious, could you share what kind of training should be done or should be given to these pre-service teachers so that they can properly help students with exceptionality or special education needs?
Yeah, that is a great question. I think there isn't, I guess, a one size fits all answer for sure. I think, what comes to my mind is definitely more of a kind of hands-on experience. So not just providing teachers with some textbooks to read. Of course, it's important to read, foundational papers about self-regulation and self-regulated learning. But I think teachers need to actually experience how they can, potentially foster that. So teaching teachers, either through a professional development about those components, about, the important components of self-regulated learning, and then providing them opportunities to practice them. So we know, of course, planning is, at the forefront, the forethought phase of self-regulation. So how can we talk to teachers about the importance of planning, and then maybe just brainstorming what are different kinds of activities you can use with your students to help, foster, facilitate some planning. So I know I'm not giving us, a very specific response, because I wish I knew it, but I really think, again, providing teachers those chances to work with either, teachers to work with each other, or teachers to work
Mm-hmm.
with other audiences, so that they just have the opportunity to experience it hands-on, as opposed to just reading and, taking tests and answering multiple
Mm-hmm.
choice questions. I really think it's about that hands-on experience.
Sure, I definitely agree with you. That, agree that we need to give our pre-sub teachers more hands-on experiences so that they can use that when they actually start teaching in their classroom. So, yeah, thank you for sharing your response. And then my second follow-up question is, you mentioned game-based learning as your research interest. So could you share more details about this research? Because I'm really interested in learning about how the relationship between game-based learning and self-regulation. So,
Yeah. So if anyone knows me, or as anyone's getting to know me, you will know that I love game-based learning, because I think it's just such a great experience or opportunity for students. Just because games can have, they might have a narrative to them. You have that goal, and of course it's important to have a learning goal, but you're also given a goal, to I'll give you a specific example. The game Crystal Island, the goal is to solve the mystery. So you have your learning, but you might not even necessarily realize how much you're learning, because you think, you're doing that while playing a game, while having fun. And of course, it's not going to be the same for all students. Not every student is going to have, the best time with a game. But I think in general, it's, safe to say that when kids are told you get to play a game, that's exciting. So that's one reason why I love game-based learning. There's one specific reason, and there are many reasons why game-based learning is effective. There have been multiple meta-analyses that have investigated that. To me, one specific reason is the agency, or the freedom that it provides to students. So students are in, and we've heard of games being choose your own adventure, right? So students get to actually decide what they're doing. So back to Crystal Island. So maybe I should talk about Crystal Island a little bit. So the goal of this game is, you're brought to this tropical island, and everyone on the island is sick. And you're being brought to try to solve the mystery. What is this illness? What type of food is transmitting it? And how would you recommend a treatment plan? So students are learning about microbiology, even if they don't really realize that. So they're learning about viruses and bacteria and carcinogens and mutagens, and but they're doing that by navigating to different locations on this camp, and talking to non-player characters and asking them, what food did you eat this morning, or what do you typically eat? So then from that, students should be able to gather that, oh, maybe this is the transmission source because Teresa, the sick patient, was eating it. So engaging in that kind of hypothesis testing and scientific reasoning. And then, so when students are doing that, they're able to choose what they're doing. They can gather the clues they want to. And then they submit, it's called the diagnosis worksheet, and they submit that and say, here, I think I found a solution. So again, they have that freedom to gather the clues they want to. But that actually did lead to, I guess, another research question that I had, well, when working with Roger, still at McGill, actually, and then moving on to NC State, the idea is providing that agency or that freedom to students always beneficial? Is it maybe too much? So then leading back to students with exceptionalities, they might have some kind of cognitive deficit or metacognitive deficit.
Right.
So providing them that is the agency too much. So we took the game Crystal Island. That was a game that was developed by James Lester and his team at North Carolina State. And we basically created different conditions that varied on the amount of agency. So some students were able to play the game as is, full agency, but then we created a version that had limited agency. So students were still able to walk around, but they were a little limited. They were told, you're going to this location, and they had to read all the content. And I didn't mention this, but also when students go to different locations, there are books they can read about specific viruses and bacteria. So in this limited agency, they had to read everything, which, spoiler, we hypothesized that students would really not like that because you kind of lose that agency a little bit.
Right.
And then we created a third condition where students had no agency. They actually just watched a playback of a researcher playing Crystal Island. So that it was no agency. And we, when we originally created this was even before students with exceptionalities. This was just to investigate agency. And I do have a paper about it in Computers in Education, so I'm happy to share it with, with
yeah,
yeah,
sure.
So,
Thank you so much. This is so great. And I totally agree that like, game-based learning is becoming popular, especially nowadays, like students that we will have, they were born into the digital world already, right? So, but I think that it's also important for us to give like a training for teachers because those teachers may not be familiar with the idea of game-based learning. And even if this is a gift for students, if teachers are not comfortable utilizing in their classroom, I think like, maybe the value of the game-based learning may decrease. So I think that, it's also important to train teachers and students properly so that we can maximize the value of game-based learning. So.
Yes, absolutely. And again, providing students that freedom is basically what self-regulation is, right?
Right.
Students as independent learners. So providing them with a game that they can play, they're able to engage in self-regulatory processes and strategies. And where the teacher comes in is also, helping the students teach them what kinds of strategies might be more or less beneficial. So we found, and I found in a couple of studies, that students engage in a lot of just guessing and checking, which is very, very common. And it could be, that's the strategy, but to be, more, self-regulatory and monitoring and controlling what you're engaging in, maybe it would be helpful if a student was taught, well, maybe you should judge how well you understand content as opposed to guessing. So I see, that agency is in the self-regulation, but then also in the gameplay. And I think that's what makes it
totally. Yes. So yeah, thank you. And for those who are watching this, if you're interested in learning more about game-based learning and Dr. Taub's research, feel free to email her. She will happy to, discuss your questions. So, all right, thank you. So now we're going to move on to our next question. So this is our last question for today's interview. And the question is, what are some recommendations that you want to share with grad students?
So that's also a great question. I think as a graduate student, you don't need to know exactly what you're doing and what your career path is on, during your first semester, even second or third semester. I think I would say it's just take that time to explore and just, you have your interests coming in, but you can also explore new interests. And I didn't know that much about self-regulated learning before meeting Roger, and then it just exposed me to a whole new world. And then, I thought about how can I apply that to my interests. So it's really about just take some time in grad school to explore what you're really passionate about. And also you might be passionate about something one day, and then next day, next month, whatever, you might have a different interest, and that's okay too. You want to become an expert in a field, but it doesn't mean you're not able to explore, a range of different topics. And I think, having that freedom, back to agency, really made my experience as a grad student really, really amazing. So I just find, to me, it's just, enjoy being a grad student. I know it can be stressful at times, but it's also, it's a great time. And then something else is, after graduating, if you want to take the academic route, and I guess this is a two-part advice. First of all, you don't necessarily have to take the route that you had originally intended, and there are many different routes you might want to take. For me, I knew I wanted to go into academia, but something as an academic, I would say to a student, don't rush to become a faculty member. If you can be a postdoc, my postdoc, well, years-ish, because then I got a faculty position, but being a postdoc was really also a wonderful experience. And I think sometimes it's viewed as, oh, you couldn't get a faculty position, so you took a postdoc. And I really don't think that's the case. Being a postdoc is really just wonderful. It provides you, again, the experience and opportunities to work on your research, explore what you're interested in without having to do all the administrative work of an assistant professor, which I'm not complaining about, but I'm just saying being a postdoc was wonderful too. So I tell any graduate student, if you can be a postdoc and you want that, do it.
All right, thank you so much. That's really helpful. And I believe that graduate students who are watching this interview video definitely feel more relief, and then also learn about different career options, and really great recommendations for graduate students. So we really appreciate your time and your sharing your experience with us, and then thank you for your time, and we hope that we can see you again. So thank you, Dr. Taub.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye.